Serious. What are some entry-level jobs with room to move up, that actually hire people at entry level without requiring years of experience? Attention. Serious. Tag notice, jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. Water operators. It's a well-paying job, with great benefits, that's good for the community. Sort of a sense of job security considering it's necessary to keep society functioning. The water industry is looking for workers almost everywhere. Most companies do not require previous experience and will not only train you, but will send you to trainings and classes on their dime. If you don't want to be an operator or an engineer, there are a lot of administrative positions in the field as well. It's a very large industry that people forget exists. Everything that we do has a water professional behind it somewhere. There is a lot of opportunity there. Source: I work for a non-profit that provides those trainings. An area funeral home chain hires entry-level staff to assist with operations in a variety of ways. They provide on-the-job training, decent pay, and a benefits package. Plus, the funeral home industry is steady business, offering the potential of long-term employment. Flew helicopters in the Navy for a few years. On my first deployment to Southeast Asia, I was flying over the Sea of Japan and saw a large pulsing aura of red light far enough below the surface I could not make out a source. We were 30-ish miles from shore and had not been briefed on any assets in the area that might make something like that make sense. No erroneous indications on instruments or radio chatter, just slow steady pulsing red light. We saw it, circled it a few times, made a note of the time and location we encountered it, and my crew asked if I wouldn't mind getting the hell out of there. So we finished our transit and I made a note of everything in my debrief. I passed it up the chain of command, but they basically wrote it off as some sort of visual phenomenon we had from a long day of flying in dry suits. It's always been hard to imagine our entire crew hallucinating the same thing. One of the most magical nights I ever had was when I was serving in an unseen Navy warship, and we were homeward bound after a long and unpredictable deployment. I was dealing with a bout of insomnia, and decided to go down aft for a breath of fresh air. It was a very dark, moonless night, and as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I really began to appreciate the phosphorescence glowing in our wake, bright green against the dark water. Then I looked closer, to see a pod of dolphins playing in the phosphorescence, leaving their own bright glowing trails as they streaked through the water. Now, I knew what it was, and what caused it, but it was something that I imagine would have appeared quite mystical to sailors back in the past. It was stunning, though. I sat and watched them for about an hour. Such a vivid memory. Oh sure, lots of auditory hallucinations. You're all alone in the middle of the ocean, and you hear your name being called all the time. Or you're down below, and hear someone running on the deck. I was a sailor in the Navy. While I was on lookout duty on the bridge at night, a dude walked and stood beside me, breathing hard. I was looking out at sea and I was blocking the stairs going down, so I turned around to whisper sorry, and what do you know? There's no one. I was tired, so I chalked this up to hallucination, but it felt real. Edit: we were in the South China Sea. Edit: pretty neat to see other Army, Navy folks with similar, if not the same exact experience. When I was forward lookout, I saw a ball-type object bouncing right to left at the horizon. Definitely was no satellite nor a planet, star. Not too sure what it was. Edit, it bounced like say a ball would. Was kind of a weird experience, and if I remember right it was somewhere near Australia. Edit 2, since people keep asking, this was around 7 years ago. Fog. I don't care what anyone says. There is something in that fog. Edit, not a joke. A dead calm with thick fog is creepy and will drive you to wild hallucinations. I imagine it's not dissimilar to a sensory deprivation chamber. It was about 3 a.m. during my watch on an ocean passage. I was sleep deprived and fatigued. The sailing yacht was silhouetted against the moon glistening on the water. Suddenly a dolphin jumped from the water below the boom, broad reach, and splashed back in. Then again for the next 3 hours, with the exact position and sound over and over and over. I felt like I was descending into madness because I couldn't stop the apparent delusion. I'm still not sure if there ever was a dolphin, or if it just happened once and was then stuck in some sort of mental loop. On a yacht delivery from France to Greece, after a couple of nights of no sleep, on the third night we were in the Bonifacio Straits. All around in the sea I could see drowning people, waving and shouting for help. We moored up the following morning. Sleep deprivation is a hell of a thing. When I was roving patrol on a submarine, I always thought I saw someone walking parallel to me down missile compartment upper level. If I was on the port side, then I saw them on the starboard side and vice versa. I always chalked it up to pipes and valves creating weird shadows. Additionally, it felt heavy on that level, like there was some sort of presence. The feeling you get when someone's watching you. I never told anyone. Then one day a few weeks into patrol, one of the other rovers asked me if it felt weird up there. He specifically said that he saw someone up there too, just like I had. We shared stories and then talked to the third rover, and he said I only go up there to do my rounds every hour, then get the fuck out of that haunted level. I work security on different ships. One time during night shift on a cruise ship, my colleague and I were in the security office watching the CCTV cameras and just talking shit to pass the time. At the exact same time we both saw a black figure, shadow, pass in front of the camera in the children's play area. We both got super freaked out but kept watching the other cameras in the vicinity to see if whatever it was passed by those, as it was the only way it could go from where we saw it, and there was no way it could leave the area without passing by in front of one of the cameras. It never did. So we went to the area to check it out but obviously found nothing. Afterwards we went back to review the footage and didn't see any shadow moving in that camera again, even though we both saw it the first time in the live feed. Needless to say, we kinda started avoiding the kids area at night after that. A lot of death happens out at sea. I crewed on a tall ship and we were anchored with a bunch of others in a harbor. We had to take shifts at night because it was an old boat and did weird things. I was on shift in the little steering cabin when I heard someone running around the deck. I thought it was one of the other crew, so I poked my head out and told them to knock it off. They kept running and I was afraid they'd slip, so I followed them. We went around the whole ship twice before I caught up with the shapeless shadow, which stopped and flew directly up into the air. Convinced it was a prank, I walked back to the end of the boat when I saw we had drifted on anchor and were almost under the bow of a much larger ship. I called the rest of the crew and we sorted it out, but I might not have noticed until too late if it weren't for the weird shadow. I was in the U.S. Navy and worked in communications. I was a supervisor on my watch and enjoyed working the night tours while on deployment. We stood 12-hour watches from 7 p.m. 7 a.m. Around 2 a.m. I hear some chatter over the 3 mic. which is like our internal speaker system used between a few different stations on the ship. It's the bridge asking combat if they see anything on surface or air radar, maybe 10 miles out to our west. Combat returns with a negative and I don't think anything of it. About 15 minutes goes by and the bridge asks again, and asks are they sure there's nothing there. Then they ask us if we have any message traffic about any ships in the area, aircraft or anomalous weather patterns. I asked one of the guys on watch to perform the request and now my interest is piqued. I walk out of the comm center and head up to the bridge. I was on a frigate so the walk was quick, and I get up there and ask what's going on. One of my buddies points me over to the port side and we walk over. There's about 5 or 6 circular-shaped lights about 10-15 miles out in the clouds, pretty large. They aren't moving or flying around but just looking stable. These lights are also casting lights downward on the ocean, and you can see the light refracting back at the water, almost as if it were a spotlight or a beam. From what we could see, it didn't appear to be lights shining up from the water because they wouldn't pass through the clouds. The clouds also weren't super thick, it was lightly overcast, and it was the middle of the night with no other light pollution on the water. There was nothing in message traffic about any ships, subs, or aircraft in the area. We were hundreds of miles from land and the last report of any unusual weather patterns was a waterspout a few hundred miles away. We tried to take pictures with our onboard digital camera, using a long exposure, but we couldn't capture the phenomenon. After about 90 minutes the lights slowly faded, one by one, and within 15 minutes they had completely disappeared. I'm sure there's some sort of weather or atmospheric condition for what we saw, but for all intents and purposes, it fit the description of a UFO, unidentified flying object. I read a story here once where someone had family who sailed around the world. One day in the North Atlantic, their sailboat was going over some gigantic swells. They didn't have brakes at the top, so it was safe, but the boat was rising and falling way beyond the neutral. At the bottom of a trough their uncle looked up to see the sun behind a wave and the silhouette of a whale inside, above him. I only worked as a walk-off cabin attendant, but the old sea dogs always had far-fetched stories to tell. The engineer teaching us about watertight doors told us a story that happened to him on another ship that the same company used to own but was decommissioned and scrapped in 2011. These watertight doors separate the different bulkheads, underwater compartments that stop the whole ship from sinking if there is a hole in the hull. Think about the metal doors that slid down in the engine room of the Titanic. These doors are always closed. To get from compartment to compartment there was a lever that you pulled and the door opened. You stepped through, then as soon as you let go of the lever, the door would close. For the safety of the ship it would close tight shut. Even if there was a person blocking it. On this older ship there was an engineer who tripped and was crushed to death in one of these doors. Years later this engineer who told me the story tripped and fell on that same door and was about to be crushed to death in the same way, but just before killing him, it stopped and opened again, despite no one being around and nothing touching the lever. And before anyone says that there must have been some safety thing installed, no. As I said before, the one job of these doors is to close no matter what, or who is in the way. Have you ever seen 30-40? As best as I could determine, humpback whales feeding together. I know this isn't supernatural, but one whale is so seldom seen by people, let alone 30 scooping up krill at the same time. I'll never forget that. When tired I'm prone to having hallucinations just as I fall asleep. Has to do with the visual cortex shutting down just before the rest of the brain does. When this happens the brain will happily generate all kinds of exciting imagery such as giant spiders and fun characters. So I was on a 3-week sea trial for a project that I was working on at the time. 12 to 14-hour days and generally a lot of stress as we worked through the numerous issues we needed to tackle to get the ship approved. Sure as hell, I was tired all the time. I lay down in my bunk, just thinking about what needed to be done tomorrow. This kid, I reckon 8 to 10 years old, brown hair, walks into my hut, sits down on my desk and then proceeds to lunge straight at me as I jolt against the bulkhead, screaming in terror as my brain fully wakes up. Fun times. Being on board this ship, my hallucinations were the most vivid I've ever had. Marine here. It's not supernatural in the sense you're speaking about, but when Navy ships are running dark in certain waters due to certain times in history, venture back to the stern where the prop is churning up water. If conditions are right, the waves will look like they have electricity running through them. Due to the chop, it will stir up algae that glow, but the patterns the chop makes is just mesmerizing. My dad was a navigator for a U.S. Navy warship for several years, and its usual patrol routes were along the eastern seaboard and along through the Caribbean. You know what that means. Years spent traversing the Bermuda Triangle. Well, he said it was never a dangerous place in his experience and that most trips were uneventful. He said that on a lot of trips some weird shit happened. Sometimes instruments would stop working, start giving obviously inaccurate readings, and my dad would have to navigate the ship by stars. On these nights, my dad said he would see balls of light flying around them, sometimes in slow arcs and sometimes in wild patterns, but the balls always ended up diving into the sea without the sound. I got one for ya. I was in the US in 2010 to 2014 and deployed twice on 2 different ships. The first ship I was on, the USS Pearl Harbor LSD-52. We were deployed doing a Westpac. There was a span of time where we were just sailing around in open waters, not near any land whatsoever. I was one of the topside watchstanders, meaning that I was responsible for reporting any other sea or air activity, other boats or airplanes. The area we were in was so incredibly remote that there was almost no activity anywhere. Didn't see a single boat or plane for days. I got a job in manufacturing in 2015 with zero experience. Started at $15 per hour as an operator. Basically, you babysit a machine that more or less runs itself. Fast forward to now and I'm a shift mechanic making $38 per hour. I know it's all the rage to say hard work doesn't get you anywhere anymore, but I absolutely worked my ass off to learn how the machines worked, how the automation worked, and did my best to fix problems as an operator before calling for a mechanic. I got promoted after 2 years to a higher level operator position. Then a year after that, an apprentice mechanic position opened up. I applied for it and was accepted. A year later the apprenticeship ended and I was promoted to shift mechanic. 2 months after I was hired, I gave my friend a referral and he got hired on as an operator, same as me. No experience. Guess who's our other shift mechanic? We both worked hard and showed initiative and it paid off. Obviously this isn't the case everywhere, but it seems to be fairly common in the manufacturing industry. The railway. I came from the prison service having no idea what the job entailed and zero clue about trains, became a guard and am now a trainee driver on $50K plus salary. I also know of people that have gone from other roles like cleaner to driver recently. Reading all these comments about 10 hectoseconds in a trade and such makes me feel like I wasted 10 hectoseconds in retail. IDK got stuck in one job, got another one a few years later in a bank. 30 right now and not a clue to what direction to move into. I know it's a tired old cliche, but one of our best admins started in the mailroom. She had been a stay-at-home mom, wanted back into the workforce once her son was older, and took what was available, impressed one and all by her cheerful personality and strong work ethic. When an admin position came available, she flew through the testing, interview process and has been here for years. Through multiple downsizing events, she's one of the good ones, who'll be employed as long as our doors are open or she retires to play Nana. Customer support representative within IT. Think big brands, with the accumulated knowledge from their products and troubleshooting will give you experience to move upwards to, for example, on-site support, internal IT support, etc. And through that you can start practicing and study free time into something more advanced, back-end or front-end, maintaining servers, networking and such. That's how I've climbed the ladder, though stagnated a bit past years due to health issues. Otherwise I would have advanced more into back-end as I was about to start studying programming with courses provided through my employer.